Your sister needs your apartment for her brand launch, so you have 24 hours to get out. My mother said it to my face without blinking. She claimed Vanessa needed my specific vibe to succeed, and that forcing me onto the street was actually a spiritual lesson in letting go of material things. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I picked up my keys, walked out the door, and started the timer on their destruction. Before I tell you what I found in the safe that night, tell me in the comments, have you ever had a family member disguise their greed as spiritual advice? I want to see your stories. I drove 3 blocks before I pulled over, my hands shaking so hard I couldn't grip the steering wheel. It wasn't the rain that blinded me. It was the sheer, suffocating absurdity of why this was happening. My sister, Vanessa, wasn't homeless. She wasn't in danger. She was launching a high-ticket wellness brand, and she had decided that my loft apartment had the abundance energy she needed for her launch week content. Her own apartment apparently had stagnant vibes, because she hadn't cleaned it in 6 months. That was the logic. That was why I was homeless. But it was my mother, Sterling, who sold the betrayal. When I had tried to argue, standing in the middle of my living room while Vanessa touched my furniture like she already owned it, Sterling hadn't yelled. She had used the voice she reserves for her coaching clients. Danielle, she had said, placing a hand on my shoulder. Your resistance to this change is exactly why you're stuck. You're operating from a scarcity mindset. We aren't kicking you out. We are helping you release your attachment to material security. You need to trust the universe to catch you. They weren't just taking my home. They were framing it as a spiritual favor. They were weaponizing therapy language to dress up their greed as a life lesson. If I fought back, I wasn't a victim. I was toxic and blocking the flow. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. Sterling had pressed a check into my hand like it was a communion wafer. $3,200. For a motel, she'd said. Until you manifest your next step. I looked at the check in the dim light of my car dashboard. It wasn't even their money. It was drawn from my father's emergency credit line, the one he'd sworn he wouldn't touch after his last failed investment. They were going into debt to displace me. In the rush to get me out, Vanessa had literally started burning sage while I was still packing. I had thrown clothes into garbage bags and electronics into my trunk. But as the adrenaline began to fade into a cold, dull ache, my eyes snapped to the empty passenger seat. The wall safe. I had installed a small safe behind the master bedroom closet mirror 2 years ago. I kept my birth certificate, my emergency cash, and my passport in there. In the chaos of Sterling's lectures and Vanessa's smudging rituals, I hadn't emptied it. I reached for the door handle to go back, but I stopped. If I went back now, I would be the crazy daughter interrupting Vanessa's alignment. They wouldn't let me in. They would call the police and say I was trespassing. They had the new keys. I saw the locksmith leaving as I walked out. I sat back, the rain drumming against the roof. My name is Danielle. I am 28 years old and I work in risk management. My entire career is built on identifying liabilities, calculating exposure, and cutting losses before a company collapses. I sat there looking at my childhood home through the rain-slicked windshield, and for the first time I didn't see my parents. I didn't see my sister. I saw a bad investment. I saw a group of people who had leveraged my loyalty against my survival. They thought they had taught me a lesson about letting go. Fine. I was going to show them what happens when a risk manager finally decides to liquidate the asset. I put the car in drive. I didn't go back for the passport. I knew exactly where it was, and more importantly, I knew exactly who would try to use it. They wanted my life. They could have it. I was about to audit theirs. I checked into a Motel 6 because it was the only place that wouldn't ask for a deposit I couldn't cover. I didn't sleep. I didn't even unpack the few bags I'd managed to salvage. I sat on the edge of the bed, the cheap polyester spread scratching my legs, and opened my laptop. The anger inside me wasn't hot anymore. It had cooled into something sharp and precise. My mother had called me toxic for resisting. My sister had burned sage to cleanse my energy. But they had forgotten who I was. I audit risks for Fortune 500 companies. I find the cracks in the foundation that people try to paint over. And I knew with absolute certainty that my parents didn't have the cash to fund Vanessa's high-ticket lifestyle on their own. My dad had maxed out his credit line just to get me out of the house. So, where was the money for the launch party coming from? I logged into the county recorder's portal. I hadn't checked the deed since my grandmother's probate closed 3 years ago, but I knew what I would find. Owner, Danielle Vance. Clear title. No mortgage. Then I saw the red flag. There was a pending filing notification on the parcel number. It had been submitted 48 hours ago, the same day I was fired. I clicked on the digital scan. It was a request for a quitclaim deed transfer. It claimed that I, Danielle Vance, was transferring full ownership of the property to Sterling and Donald Vance for the sum of $1. Below that was a second filing, a lien application. My parents weren't just taking the house back. They were borrowing against it. But this wasn't a standard bank loan. Banks take weeks. This was a hard money loan. High interest, predatory terms, fast cash. The lender was listed as Vance Capital. No relation, just a cruel coincidence. And the principal amount was $200,000. They were stealing my house to liquidate $200,000 in equity, likely to fund Vanessa's venue, catering, and influencer gift bags. I stared at the screen waiting for the panic to hit, but it didn't. Instead, I felt a rush of adrenaline. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a felony. They were forging my signature on federal documents. I needed the timeline. I needed to know when the pen was hitting the paper. I opened a new tab. My father, Donald, has used the same password for everything since 2005. It took me 10 seconds to log into his email account. I bypassed the inbox and went straight to the trash folder where he thought he was being clever. There was an email from a Mr. Vance at Vance Capital. Subject: closing confirmation. Body: the mobile notary is confirmed for Friday at 2 in the afternoon. Please ensure all parties are present with valid ID. The check for $200,000 will be released upon notarization. Friday. 2 days away. The location was listed as the residence. My dining room. The room they had just kicked me out of. I did a quick background check on the lender, Mr. Vance. He wasn't a banker. He was a shark. His reviews were filled with people who had lost their homes because they missed a single payment. He didn't want interest, he wanted collateral. He seized assets for a living. My parents were walking into a shark tank covered in chum, and they were dragging me in with them. I could have called the police right then. I could have called the title company, flagged the file for fraud, and shut down the loan in 10 minutes. But I didn't. Because I know my parents. If I stopped them now, they would spin it. They would tell the neighbors I was confused, or that I had verbally agreed to the sale and then backed out to be spiteful. They would play the victim, gaslight the family, and try again with a different lender next month. I didn't need a disruption. I needed a conviction. I needed them to commit the crime in ink in front of a sworn officer of the state. I called my boss at 9 in the morning. I have a family emergency, I said. It wasn't a lie. My family was the emergency. I took the rest of the day off. I knew their schedule better than they knew mine. Friday mornings were for abundance planning, which meant a 3-hour brunch at the country club they couldn't afford, drinking mimosas and talking about how the universe was going to provide for them. They would be gone until at least 1 in the afternoon. I parked my rental car 2 streets over and walked to the house. The rain had stopped, leaving the pavement steaming in the sun. I walked up the driveway, my heart hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I still had my spare key, the one I kept on a separate ring, the one they always forgot I had because they never paid attention to the details. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house was silent. It smelled of Vanessa's lavender essential oils and my father's cigars. I moved quickly. I didn't go to my old room. I went straight to the master bedroom closet. I slid the mirror aside and keyed in the code for the wall safe. It opened with a beep. My birth certificate? Gone. My emergency cash? Gone. My passport? Gone. A cold smile touched my lips. They hadn't just broken into the safe, they had emptied it. They needed my passport to prove I was the one signing the deed. Vanessa wasn't just going to forge my signature. She was going to become me. They had crossed the line from property fraud into federal identity theft. They were digging the hole deeper than I could have ever hoped. I went downstairs to the dining room. The table was already set, not for a meal but for a closing. 3 chairs. A pitcher of water. A clean notepad. It looked professional. It looked legitimate. I reached into my bag and pulled out the device I'd bought that morning. A high-definition motion-activated nanny cam, no bigger than a stick of gum. I scanned the room for a vantage point. My eyes landed on the bookshelf behind the head of the table. Vanessa had filled it with aesthetic books she never read, props for her background. I pulled down a thick volume on the art of ethical living. The irony was too perfect to pass up. I hollowed out the spine with a pocket knife, wedged the camera inside and slid it back onto the shelf. The lens was perfectly positioned between the gold lettering, staring directly at the chair where the seller would sit. I pulled up the app on my phone. The feed went live. A crisp, high-definition view of the crime scene. I wiped the dust from the shelf, checked the door lock to make sure I hadn't left a trace and slipped out the back way. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Sterling. Sending you love and light today, D. Hope you're finding peace. I looked at the message, then at the live feed of their dining room on my screen. I am Mom, I whispered. I'm finding it right now. I got into my car and waited. The trap was set. Now I just needed the rats to find the cheese. I parked my rental car 3 houses down, tucked behind a landscaping truck. It was 5 minutes to 2. The street was quiet, the kind of suburban silence that usually hides the worst secrets. At 3 minutes to 2, a black Range Rover pulled into the driveway. A man stepped out. He was exactly what his online reviews suggested. Sharp suit, aggressive walk, carrying a leather briefcase that looked heavy. Mr. Vance. The shark. He didn't look like a man who offered grace periods. He looked like a man who liquidated assets before the ink was dry. 2 minutes later, a silver sedan arrived. The mobile notary. She looked tired, clutching her official journal and a stamp bag. She was the neutral party, the gatekeeper of legality. If she stamped that deed, the house was gone. Then the garage door opened. My parents walked out to greet them. Sterling was wearing her spiritual guru white linen, smiling that beatific smile she uses when she's trying to sell a course. Donald looked sweaty, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. They shook hands with Vance. They ushered the notary inside. But I was waiting for one more person. Where was Vanessa? I looked down at my phone. The nanny cam feed was crisp. The dining room was empty for a moment and then they walked in. Sterling. Vance. The notary. And me. I froze. For a split second my brain short-circuited. Walking behind Sterling was a woman who looked exactly like me. Same height. Same dark, shoulder-length hair. Same navy blazer. The one I had bought for my first interview 5 years ago, which I thought I had lost in the move. It was Vanessa. She wasn't wearing a wig. She had dyed her hair. She had cut it. And she had used heavy contouring makeup to sharpen her jawline, erasing the softness of her face to mimic my bone structure. She wasn't just standing in for me, she had become me. She was holding my passport, the one stolen from the safe. The audacity was so absolute it made me nauseous. They weren't just forging a signature. They were committing criminal impersonation. Identity theft. Federal fraud involving travel documents. They were betting everything on the fact that the passport photo was 5 years old, taken before I lost weight and changed my style. They were betting the notary wouldn't look too closely. I watched the feed, breathless. This is our daughter Danielle, Sterling said smoothly. She's nervous. Big changes. ID please, the notary said. Vanessa handed over my passport without hesitation. I prayed the notary would see it. She compared the photo to Vanessa, then nodded. Looks good. Let's proceed. The trap was set. $200,000 went on the table. The quitclaim deed followed. Sign here. Thumbprint here. Vanessa lifted the pen. I bolted. I burst inside just as the ink hovered over the page. Forehead snapped up. Sterling gasped. Donald went pale. Vance scowled. Vanessa froze mid-signature. Sorry, I said calmly. I seem to have walked in on a felony. I dropped my real ID beside the passport, then the genuine deed next to the fake. My name is Danielle. I own this house. And unless she's my twin, you're buying stolen property. Vance's expression hardened. Is that true? Donald stammered. I turned to the notary. You almost notarized fraud. I suggest you log that. She grabbed the papers. These are coming with me. Vance shut his briefcase. You tried to defraud me. My lawyers bill $500 an hour. Expect an invoice. He stormed out. The notary followed. Vanessa tore off her wig. You ruined everything. I stopped your crime. This is our house. Sterling cried. It never was. Grandma left it to me. Leave or I call the police. Vanessa lunged forward and went live on her phone. My sister attacked me, she sobbed to the camera. She's trying to steal my inheritance. She hissed at me, sign or I destroy you. I pointed to the shelf. That nanny cam recorded everything. The forgery. And this. Her phone sagged. Smile, I said. You're filming your own charges. Donald collapsed. Please, don't call the police. With what money? Our retirement, he whispered. I slid a document forward. You liquidate it. You pay me $95,000 by Monday. Or the district attorney gets the footage. They signed. because they knew I wasn't bluffing.